I'm Benjamin Lyon. I go by Ben, and I'm 23.
Great. And basically, what are you doing to solve today's problems as a social entrepreneur? What is your story? How did you get to where you are today?
I think I'm most concerned with really mitigating or responding to an experience I had several years ago. I didn't leave the United States until I was entering my sophomore year in college, so I had um, really no worldview and very limited experience and insight. But my grandfather kind of insisted that had to change, so he took me through Singapore, Indonesia, and East Timor, and especially Indonesia and East Timor had a really big impact on me, very much a formative one, in that I was in Indonesia, in Yogyakarta, just after an earthquake had done pretty significant damage there, and people were rebuilding, and a lot of families had lost loved ones. And so that was a really difficult, but also inspiring experience to see that kind of tragedy at face level, and meet some people that were just recovering and pulling themselves out of the rubble, and but then literally the next week starting to rebuild. So very mixed experience there. And in East Timor, I was only there for 3 days, but it was during a period of militia violence. So I was actually I experienced a lot there that still kind of troubles me, and that's both just a military presence that's intimidating in general, being pulled out of your car and searched, and having bomb dogs kind of checking things, to also just witnessing, people being pushed into displacement camps with minimal resources, and having to continue their lives, and really they're guilty of nothing but trying to live their lives. So the takeaways from that summer were that I really needed to explore how I could make an impact in a situation like that, how I could participate in solving, or at least mitigating parts of those scenarios. And what I kept coming to was financial services. The question of, if anything, money, aside from the material component, is really a way to secure or preserve one's dignity. It gives you the ability to choose. So, I can choose to spend, if I have it, on my child's education. I can choose to purchase drugs, in anything. It's my choice. I can do right or wrong, but it is a choice, as opposed to really being forced with no alternative. So I started exploring microfinance and economics, and formal economics, specifically looking at how can we, in a conflict environment, provide fair financial services, credit, a safe savings facility, access to insurance to protect people from economic shocks. And that really led me very quickly into the technology side. Watching the success of M-Pesa in Kenya made me realize quickly that mobile phones, and specifically mobile money, were coming in fast, and were about to revolutionize really the world. So as I started exploring what exactly that market is going to do, and where it's going to go, what the potential for it is, I stumbled into this very early market failure, which was that microfinance institutions wanting to deliver their services more efficiently by mobile money don't have the software necessary to do so. So I set off on partnering with FrontlineSMS, an open source software provider, to at least provide that base functionality as an open source free tool. And that turned a year old actually on Sunday. And we're still very much struggling, but trying to release this functionality so that the barriers to adoption for mobile money, and then all of the efficiencies that means for the borrower, including increased savings, so that we can bring that to the microfinance community.
Wow. Sounds like a lot of cool stuff you've gotten into at a really young age, which is great. This coalition is a lot about working across traditional boundaries. So one of the questions we're asking is, how have you had to work across traditional boundaries to get things done?
Yeah, it's a big issue. I graduated in 2009 from with a bachelor's, so I really didn't have much managerial experience at all, and I kind of jumped into something that was far greater than I was prepared to handle. Because when it comes to, we're dealing with something in finance, so even microfinance has its own rules. There are global standards, then there are country standards, and had to race to really understand how we would implement something like this while adhering to a whole different regime of regulatory expectations, ethical expectations, technology changes, as the technology and then the technology capacity even changes on a country-by-country basis. So we've had to really kind of be very agile and learn to listen closely to the market, listen closely, more importantly, to the end user, to a microfinance borrower, to a worker at a microfinance institution. Because the challenges change every day, and they can be anything from us having to raise money just to stay open as a nonprofit, to figuring out how to market what we're doing and have a consistent brand and a clear message. That's actually something we haven't excelled at. So that remains a perpetual challenge, is figuring out how to communicate what we're doing to people in the West, where that's our revenue, that's our grant money, but more importantly, communicating why it matters. And it's fairly abstract and new, and the technology itself, other than in kind of siloed communities, stays out of the public discourse. So we're trying to communicate a very difficult topic, a very niche topic, and that's just a source of constant struggle.
Cool. So I'm just plugging in. What are some of the challenges you see facing young people today?
I think, I'm really at kind of the young professional stage in my life. So I would put the caveat that my observations probably don't apply as much to maybe a teenager who's trying to address some of these issues. But I have definitely in that setting, I'm mindful of the fact that intentional or not, my age can be both a virtue and a vice. A lot of people like to see a fresh new idea. They like the energy, they like the passion, but at the same time, there's a degree of hesitation involved as well, and justly so in a lot of cases, because my amount of wisdom and my amount of experience is just necessarily limited. And so from an execution standpoint, I have to communicate clearly why I'm an exception, if I am an exception to some of those things. And so I think there's always kind of a degree of a little bit being on the defensive, but at the same time, that may be me bringing my own biases to the table or my own uncertainties. So I think it's just if we want to tackle big issues, big global issues that are very complicated, the onus is on us to be to do so, or to prove that we're capable of doing that. Even more than someone that might be a seasoned in the field, who's just generally going to be they're going to have much more trust out of the gate. So I think that's a major issue, is just proving to people and getting their attention for long enough for them to see that you're serious and you're capable, and it's something that you're not going to stop doing until you're successful, that you can bounce back after failure, repeated failure, and really be kind of like a heat-seeking missile and just chase the opportunities perpetually. So I think the way that I've tried to compensate for perhaps my lack of experience is really showing that this is something that I'm not going to give up on until we succeed.
And the follow-up is, what advice would you have for a young person who's looking to get involved?
Yeah, I think, in fact, I very, very passionately, just do it. In a lot of businesses or the venture capital community, there's just a continued assumption that your first idea is wrong. And my first idea was wrong. My second idea was wrong. the general concept was correct, but just an ability to understand, what we're doing is deeply personal and very important to all of us. But we all have to be willing to question our own assumptions and be wrong, and understand that if we're trying to tackle problems that are greater than us, we have to be able to remove our own pride and ego from the table. And that when we do that, we're all the better positioned to succeed. So don't give up at all. And if you have an idea, start doing it. Start iterating. Another thing, I've been working with a startup as well. Another thing in kind of business is that especially the software business, is that if you don't hate your first product, you waited too long. You should iterate. You should release the minimum valuable product when you can, and just take baby steps to make it come to life, because there's no one grand silver bullet to any of this stuff. So be stubborn, but also be willing to make changes, be agile, and just do, and cut your teeth and sweat, and that's the best way to make things happen. And the only differentiator, it doesn't take a genius to start something that changes the world. It takes someone that's willing to listen and just take some punches and roll with them.